I would like to introduce our beloved spiritual leader so that we can all just take in exactly what we need for this week. Reverend Patrick.
Welcome, everyone. It is always a pleasure, always a joy, always an honor to be present with you on Sunday mornings. This is a life dream. You know, like Reverend Jean said that she treated for herself. And those of you who are brand new, it's not a treatment that you go to the doctor to get. It's a spiritual awareness arising from within. It's called spiritual mind treatment, treating of the mind. And because of the treatment of her mind, she got the clarity and got the wisdom and got the drive to move forward with her dream. And this is what all of us can do for ourselves. There's a specific way to do spiritual mind treatment, and we teach that. And it's just something that all of us need to pay attention to. It's something about ourselves, which you will discover as we go through this morning. So happy Easter and happy Passover to everyone. Thank you. You know, there's a special reason beyond the physical resurrection of Jesus that we are going to talk about. We will explore what this resurrection really is about. Dr. Holmes, in The Science of Mind on page 104, he says, the physical disappearance of Jesus after his resurrection was the result of the spiritualization of his consciousness. He said, this is so that he quickened his mentality that his body disintegrated and his followers could not see him because he was no longer on this plane. Planes are not places, they are states of consciousness. So Jesus not only was raised from the dead, he raised his consciousness to such a level that there was no physical embodiment left. He was turned into pure spirit in front of his disciples, and they thought he just disappeared. He didn't disappear. He was on a different plane. You know, Jesus said, in my Father's house are many dimensions, many mansions. There are really many dimensions. A mansion is the state of consciousness that you live in. You are in a mansion right now that you have created. That's your mansion. When you evolve spiritually, you create a new mansion, another mansion. So the resurrection lifts up all the faculties of humanity until they conform to the absolute idea of divine mind. Think about that. A lot of us are still entombed by our fear and our anxiety and our prejudices. But when we are free from that, we're able to rise above it. We're able to stand in a state of consciousness where there is no longer a sense of entombment. The sense of entombment is the limitation that we have set ourselves up with. What an incredible realization. Through spiritualization, one may enter into another dimension. How do you spiritualize your life? By recognizing that, first of all, you are pure spirit. You have a body, but you are spirit. You are not your body. Your body is the vehicle through which you experience being human. But that doesn't make you any less spirit. And that's the awakening. As soon as we realize that and really understand that our spirit is the Spirit of God manifesting itself as each of us, when you get that, you can rise above it. You come out of the tomb. The stone gets rolled away. Do you know what the stone is? It's the fear that blocks our exit from the tomb. It's the prejudices. It's the lack of understanding of our oneness with God. It's the feeling of separation that causes us to feel blocked by a stone of our own imagination, by a stone of our own fear. To practice the presence of God is to awaken within us the Christ consciousness. Jesus became the Christ. He developed the Christ consciousness as a child and grew into that as a man. And in his 3 years of ministry, he was able to rise to the level of Christ consciousness that says, I can leave this plane and be on another plane and still function on this plane in aid of humanity, in the service of humanity. And that's why he was able to do miracles. Miracles are things we don't understand. As soon as we understand it, it's no longer a miracle. Do you know that? That which today seems a miracle, when it is fully understood, it is spontaneously natural. So what is a miracle? It's something that we do not understand, but we see it, we sense it, we may even feel it, but we don't understand it. And the lack of understanding gives us that something that says, that's a miracle, you'll never be able to do it. And again, the stone is put in our way. Because as soon as we step through that stone, we can perform miracles. What Reverend Jean stood up and shared here today was a miracle. How did it come to her mind all of a sudden when it couldn't for years? She said, I desperately wanted to go. Desperately. Now, when you are desperate, you know what happens? You lose all sense of reason. You become irrational. And she was desperate. But no light came because there was this block. Through spiritual mind treatment, the block was removed. It's amazing what happens for us when we turn to God in our minds. When we turn to God and not see the block, not see the big stone that entombs us. People walk around in their entombment, you know. Do you know that people even decorate their entombment? They put carpet down, they hang chandeliers, they put flowers on a table in their entombment to try and make it pretty enough to say, well, okay, I can't get up, but I might as well settle for something I could create myself. When all we have to do is recognize the truth of our own being, and the entombment becomes just another state of consciousness that we switch over and the stone is rolled away. It really is the lifting up of the whole person, the whole man, as Holmes says. You know, there's a Bible dictionary that you could get, and it says that it is really the lifting up of the whole man, the whole person into the Christ consciousness, the whole person, spirit, soul, and body. When Jesus resurrected, nothing of him was left in the tomb. Do you remember that people went into the tomb to see if he was still there? And they said it was empty. And all that was left was the rags that they had wrapped his body in. How many times we have carried around the rags that we've wrapped our bodies in, the rags that separate us from the beauty of our own life, that makes us look raggedy. When you look in the mirror, if you're not happy, you're looking at a raggedy person. Well, this is all about spiritual awareness. He says the spiritualization allows us to enter another dimension. If you're not happy in the current dimension, start thinking about what spiritual mind treatment can do for you. And if you don't know what spiritual mind treatment is, the foundation class starts on the 10th. I'd be very happy to explain it. In fact, we go into the 10 core concepts, as Jackie, our minister in training, mentioned. 10 core concepts that are the foundation principles of the science of mind. Dr. Holmes says this, he says, the resurrection body then will not be snatched from some cosmic shelf as the soul soars aloft. It is already within, and we may be certain that it will be a fit instrument for the future unfoldment of the soul. You'll find that on page 376. In other words, we are walking around with the resurrection body buried in us and wrapped around with this fragmented pieces of disbelief, misbelief, and fear that wraps us in a tomb. When are you going to resurrect? When are you going to step through that door? When are you going to recognize that the stone is just, you just need to blow it and it'll blow away? It's gone. That's how simple it is, but it's not easy. You know why it's not easy? Because we have to take away from our consciousness the belief that we are really separated by a great stone that is almost impenetrable. For some people, they really believe the stone is impenetrable. And they think they have to dissolve the stone. All you have to do is let it roll away. You know what? It's round, it's like a wheel, and it can roll. Give it a kick. And you'll see, it'll roll away. When are we going to wake up to the truth of our own being? The stone is rolled away, and we are able to walk out of the entombment, walk out of fear and guilt and prejudice, and allow ourselves to experience the freedom of someone inside of us that was entombed, set free. What a feeling that must be again and again and again. We can repeat this. The stone is the blindfold that prevents us from realizing the truth of our own being. There are still people living in this world in their self-made entombment. We must pray for our leadership. Pray for all the leaders of all the countries, that humanity, every single human being, is given an example and an opportunity to understand the truth of their being. What if this message came from a higher place where more people can hear it? What if we were on the broadcast that goes around the world and people heard this and they said, well, maybe if I really try to believe that, maybe something might change in my life. Maybe I could discover what Reverend Jean discovered. The power to see beyond where I now am. That's what she saw. She saw herself in a job that got her to Europe for free. It doesn't cost you anything to get that stone rolled away, a ruin stowed away, or whatever you want to put it. It's amazing, isn't it? Sometimes we tie up our tongues so that we can't convince ourselves of the truth of what we're saying. Self-deception is one of the worst maladies that humanity can suffer from. The absolute worst maladies. A belief system that does not recognize the divinity of humanity is a false form of embodiment. And too many people are subject to that. Too many people allow themselves to be put in a tomb, wrapped in ragged clothing that's rotting around them, and they still don't wake up. You can recognize, as I said, without criticism, where the inequity is. You don't need an education, an advanced education to do that. We can make a difference by living and telling the difference, showing the differences to humanity. First, each of us must come to the state of Christ consciousness. What is Christ consciousness? The awareness of our oneness without separation. Christ consciousness does not see separation with God or with humanity. Does not see separation. Separation is what causes us to have the feeling that someone is not as good, or someone is too good, or someone is so much better. And we judge by appearances. And Jesus in his great wisdom says, judge not by appearances, but judge righteous judgment is knowing that the truth exists is oneness. The truth that exists is oneness. It's not separation. So where's the resurrection body? Dr. Holmes tells us. It says Jesus came through with the resurrection body. Where is that resurrection body? How can I find it? Well, the answers are, it is really within. And we may be certain, as he says, Dr. Holmes, who is the founder of religious science, the author of the Science of Mind, he says it is certain that it will be fit as an instrument for the future unfoldment of the soul. In other words, our soul is in an eternal evolutionary journey. You know what evolution is? Evolution has no stop sign. And if you're going to infinity, infinity has no destination. So we are in an ever-evolving realization of our beauty, of our oneness, of our clarity. Can you imagine that you could be wiser than you have ever been? And as wise as you think you can be wiser than that. Because there's no stopping in the evolution of consciousness. The inner body already exists. That's the resurrection body. We may be certain, as he said, that it will be a fit instrument for the future unfoldment of the soul. 376. There it is then, the most powerful reason in the world to celebrate Easter and Passover. To roll the stone away. What is your stone? Think about that. What is it that makes you feel less than in any moment, in any experience? Have you ever had an experience, and I don't mean that you should raise your hands, but think about this. Have you ever had an experience in your whole life that something is not working for you? That you tried something and it failed, and you felt, hopeless. That you went to meet somebody and you were disappointed by the reception you got. That you thought you were well received and you felt you were not. All of those are stones that entomb us in a false sense of blockage. It is a false sense of blockage. You don't need Roto-Rooter. You don't need Roto-Rooter. You don't need any liquid plumber. You don't need any of that. You just need an understanding of the truth of who you are. And the stone is gone. And your liberty is in hand. There it is. You and I are walking around with the resurrection body and not know it. I hope that when you walk out of here today, that you walk out knowing, feeling, with a sense of certainty that you don't have to be entombed anymore, that you are now free to think beyond boundaries. Any boundary that you have set up becomes a stone. but you can think beyond boundaries and reach forward with your life. The resurrection body. We must know that the stone is our entombment and have it rolled away before we are trapped in our constant belief that we are less than and that we are separated. We must rise to the point of regeneration. Be transformed by the renewing of what? Your mind. That's a scripture. So it is time that this is the meta message of Easter. This is the time when we need to realize what Easter really is talking about. It's talking about Jesus coming out of a sense of limitation and blockage, and that people who thought that they had put this enormous rock, this enormous stone in front of him that he'd never get out, they found stone just rolled aside. And you know what it said? Angels came and just rolled. You have angels that are ready to help you roll that stone away. It's not by might nor by power, but by my Spirit, says the Lord. We don't need any more awareness. We just need to take hold of what we now have. Christ means the universal idea of sonship, of which each of us is a member. There is nothing to fear but fear itself. Who said that? Well, you better believe it. It's still true today. There's nothing to fear but fear itself. It's a quote that is more pertinent today than ever before, because it is more subtle to recognize that we are living in fear. It is more subtle to recognize and more difficult to recognize that fear is the thing that has been keeping us feeling less, feeling hurt, feeling disappointed, feeling our lack of oneness with God, the divine, the oneness is more subtle now, and it's hard to recognize. So it takes a group like this to help us to think of what limitations have we accepted. That's the stone. That's the stone. Remember, the resurrection body is already in you, and it is the meta message of Easter. To those of us, I want to share with you a message from Dr. Holmes about Easter. And here it is. This message was delivered in 1956. He says this: "Today then, let us prepare to behold, to be happy, to be free, to sing the song of life, and not the dirge of the funeral march. And all those beloved friends who have gone, we know that there are bodies celestial and bodies terrestrial. So also is the resurrection of the dead. The body is sown in weakness, it is raised in power. It is sown in natural body, it is raised a spiritual body. For there is both a natural body and a spiritual body. So it has been written that the first man is of this earth, the second, the Lord from heaven. And as we have all borne the image of this earth, so shall we also bear the image of heaven. And let us think also then of those who have left that way and thought was dead." Can you imagine that? The great, great power of life. To be shared with you is the power that can free you. He says this: "They have but gone a little nearer to the marker, or the maker rather, of all music, to the master of all singing, and though we have laid their physical bodies upon the altar of our faith, we know that their spiritual bodies are resurrected today and in joy walked in the kingdom of God and waft back to us a kiss from the kingdom of heaven." End of quote. That's the message from our founder. Didn't believe in eternal damnation or death as a permanent state of being. You see, we only have a body. We are not our bodies. When our bodies die, we still live. And he says that when we live beyond the body, we can still be here. We can still hear and be heard, see and be seen, speak and be spoken to, and we have memory as a continuity of our life. Our life is eternal, therefore it can't be cut off by death. If we can die, God can die, because the life we have is the life of God. I mean, it's so logical, it's almost stupid not to believe it. But we've done it for years. We've done it for years. So what I want you to do now is look in your program and let us repeat the affirmation that we stood up so proudly and read. Let us begin. In this moment, I celebrate the truth of my spiritual being and the oneness of my mind with the infinite mind of God. The joy of this knowing fills me with a deep sense of peace. This peace is ceaselessly active in me through every moment each day, and I live in constant awareness of my inseparable oneness with God, the great Creator, the one original life source, and the one mind in and through which I live and have my being. And so it is. Thank you very much. God bless. Namaste. Take a seat.